Alright guys, welcome to video 13. Today we're going to be talking about divs and spans, and I'm just going to get right into it here. This is my code here, and you may have noticed in previous videos that I've already added divs and spans, and you may not know what those are. So here I have a div, right, with an ID built in. We'll talk about those in a second. And I've also added a span just to demonstrate the differences between divs and spans, okay? So divs and spans do the exact same thing, but they work a little bit differently. Okay, divs and spans are both designed to style different sections of your website. Okay, that's the simplest explanation I can give you. Similar to like an H1 is a header and a P is a paragraph, and a div and a span are used to style other elements. Okay, so the difference between them is that the divs are block level elements and the spans are inline elements. And I don't know if we've talked about blocks and inlines in previous videos here, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about them one more time. Okay. Okay, so on my website I have some block level elements already here, so I'm going to show you what they look like and what they do. The H1 and the paragraph. If you take a look at the paragraph here, you'll notice that it takes up all the space that it can that's available to it. It goes all the way to the edge of the browser window. Okay, that's what a block level element does. It takes up as much space as it can horizontally. And it also has some built-in margins on top and bottom. Notice there's space between this and the H2, and there's space between the top and the H1. All right. Same goes with the H1 itself. There's some margins built in to them on top and bottom. So block level elements take up as much space as they possibly can that's available to them, and they have margins on top and bottom by default. Okay, so I didn't add those spaces there; they created themselves. This is an example of an inline element, this M tag. Okay, and I added it around the word main to prove to you that it doesn't create a line after it ends. Right? So the word main is italic. Okay, the M tag ends just before this header and right at the end of main. It would end right here. But you'll notice that the header, the word header, right here, doesn't move down. Okay, it stays in the same line. That's because the M tag, if I go back to here, only is taking up as much space as that word is. Okay, I don't know if your book is the one that uses this term, and I forget where I read it, but there's a good term, shrink wrap. Okay, it shrink wraps around the whatever it is that it's styling. In this case, it's just this word, so it's the size of that font. That's all it is. So a span works similarly to that. So I have it wrapped around these two words here that are I'm going to deem red. Okay, and when I create my classes for this and style them, it's only going to affect those two words. It's not going to create margins above or below. It's not going to take up an entire line. Okay, it's going to stay in that same line. And my div up here is a block level element that is going to take up the entire amount of space it can. In this case, this is my first div, which contains everything. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a second. So divs are generally used to chunk out different areas of information. It doesn't necessarily have to deal with layout. In this case, I have everything inside of this. But in the case of this particular layout, I'm going to use divs to separate out my header from my nav from all the other sections of my website. So it's very useful for chunking different areas of information because they can contain other elements. Okay, other block level elements and other inline elements, whatever you'd like. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So next I'm going to talk about IDs here, IDs and classes. I have an ID here that I've added, and it's been there in previous videos that I've named container. And as I mentioned a few seconds ago, I named this container because it contains everything, right? So a good rule of thumb, just in general, like everything else, is to keep these names for your IDs lowercase. They can be whatever you want, okay, but I keep them lowercase. They are case sensitive in the CSS. And then I would just name them something that actually matches what you're creating. In this case, it's container. So if you see this here, it ends at the very bottom. It contains everything. Okay, so container is a very good name for it. Next, I have a div that I've named header because this is actually my header section that's going to contain my logo and that background image for my layout. Right, so name it something that makes sense. Okay, and next I have nav, and and keep going here, content, main content, and so on and so forth. The other thing to keep in mind with IDs is that an ID can only be used once per page. So once I've used this ID equals nav, I can't use it anywhere else on screen. Okay. Um, Again, IDs in combination with divs is how you chunk out the different layouts, the different sections of your layout. Okay. So that's exactly how I want you to do it. It's a very good way of working. You could technically use IDs for everything. I mean, you can technically use divs for everything. Anything you want. They don't have to be just areas of your website. But just this is a good combination, divs with IDs for the different areas of your website. Okay. Um, and the span here, I don't have an ID. I have a class. Okay. Um, Classes are another way to hook into the HTML, right? The difference between an ID and a class is that a class can be used multiple times. So I can use this class. In this case, I'm going to make this text red just for example purposes. But I can use this class in any other element that I'd like. Okay, so I could add it to an UL or I could add it to an LI. You could also add IDs to any other elements. They don't just have to be with divs. Okay, so I'll make that clear. So I could make this UL ID equals navigation if I wanted some more control over just the UL for some reason. Okay, so they can go in any element you'd like. They don't have to be constrained to just divs and spans. All right, so use them throughout your website however you see fit. I have a very basic layout, so we're not going to get too complex with the layout, but you'll see how I use them, and it's exactly how I want you guys to use them in your layouts.